Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting Moonlit Lotus Lake, and I'm going to be sipping on my Earl Grey tea. And if you enjoy this process, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel, and that you also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, purple violet, cobalt blue, fire red, deep yellow. This is green oxide and Mars black. And of course you can switch up those colors as well if you'd like to. For my tools today, I have 3 paint brushes. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush. I have a number 8 round synthetic brush. And I have a number 1 round synthetic brush. And throughout this painting process, I will refer to these as small, medium, and large. And of course, you can switch those up as well. If you're painting along with me, you're probably going to want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, I will be providing you with a couple of additional resources that can help you through your painting process. One of them is a link where you can purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the large canvas to the same kind of paint and all the good stuff in between. So that's there for you. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what I'm going to be doing for my first step is I'm painting my sky. I'm using my large bristle brush. The colors I'm using are black, purple, blue, and white. And how I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to be applying my paint in a left to right brush stroke. I'm going to be bringing my sky down about halfway down my canvas, and I'm going to have my sky dark at the top and light at the bottom. So I'm going to start with black, purple, and blue on my brush, and as I work my way down towards the horizon line, I'm going to introduce white, and then I'll continue as I move down towards the bottom of my sky, I'll be using more white. You can get your sky to be as purple or as blue or as gray as you would like to. I'm going somewhere right in the middle of those. And I'm going to use a good amount of paint so my paint kind of glides across and I get nice long brush strokes. So I'm going to start with all 3 colors, black, blue, and purple, and about equal parts of each color on my brush to start out. And I'm going to go all the way across that top with those 3 colors. And by using the purple and the blue together, you're going to see a real nice variation in the tones of your sky, so your sky doesn't end up just a flat color. And then as I work my way down, right now I'm going to start to introduce white with the purple and the blue, and I'm not washing my brush because I know I still have some good black on my brush that will help to get those colors to be a little bit more on the grayer side as opposed to on the vibrant side. So you can certainly steer it in whatever direction that you want. If you want yours to be lighter or darker or bluer or more purple, that's totally fine. And I'm just going to bring my sky about halfway down my canvas. So you can just kind of eyeball wherever that halfway point is. If you wanted to, you could even make yourself a couple of little markers that'll kind of give you that stopping point as you're coming down that sky. And I just kind of keep reloading my brush with those 4 colors, but I am using more white as I come down the sky. I am going to kind of make sure that I have this transitioning in a nice fluid way or a nice gradient. So I just reloaded my brush with some blue and purple. And I like to, as my paint is drying, especially when I'm doing a gradient, I like to kind of work my way up and down that gradient in a back and forth motion. So what's happening is I'm kind of working those colors into one another. You can even mess them up a little bit and then just kind of smooth them out with that left to right brush stroke. And then I just am going to add a little bit more white to my brush as I'm going right down to the what's going to be the horizon line down and through here. And you don't have to worry about a perfect line down at the bottom because we are going to be covering that with some beautiful distant mountains. And if you wanted to, you could certainly do a second layer on this to get it smoother looking. But using that white in there will most likely get you a nice soft layer to it. And then we're going to be using this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your sky done and you've got it as light or as dark or as purple or as blue as you want, you can certainly wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting our water. So I'm going to use my large brush and I'm going to be using the same colors, but I'm going to make my life a little bit easier. And I'm just going to flip my canvas upside down. And I'm going to do the same exact thing I did for the sky, only on the water. And I'm going to leave myself a little bit of a gap. So I'm starting with black, blue, and purple all on my brush at the same time, just like I did for my sky. And I'm starting up at the top. This just makes it easy to paint the bottom edge, or makes it easy to just go through the same process and not have to worry about, you know, the bottom of the canvas or anything like that. So this is just a kind of an easy way to go about it. I just reloaded my brush with all the colors plus a little bit of white, and I'm going to get it to go lighter and lighter as it comes towards what's going to be my land. And again, you could make it more vibrant. It doesn't have to be the same exact color as your sky. If it's got a little bit more blue or a little bit more purple in it, that's totally fine, because the reflection in the water can always be skewed a little bit. It does not need to look like a photo mirror representation of it. It can certainly have some different hues and stuff. And we're going to be having a whole bunch of flowers and a lot of other information in our water, so it is going to be all right if it is not exactly the same color. And again, I'm going to leave myself about maybe an inch or two gap as it's between those two sections. And then we are going to be using this same brush for the next step. So after you've got your water on here, you can wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting our back hills or back mountains. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors that I'm going to be using are black, blue, purple, and white. But I do want to forewarn you of a couple of things before you start this step. One, that you turn your canvas back up the right way. So you want to make sure the larger section is on the top. And two, you want to make sure that your canvas is dry. So you can either, take that extra long break if you'd like to, or you can find some kind of fun fanning method to get it dry, or you can do as I did and I just whipped out my blow dryer to get it dry. So whatever works for you is totally fine. So we are going to be making these distant hills that appear to be being illuminated by the moon, but I don't want them to be too bright. I just kind of want them to fade off in the distance, which is why I'm using blue and purple and black in them, so they just take on that atmospheric distant kind of hill that we see. So some of them are going to be darker at the top with maybe some little highlights from where the moon is going to be, but I want the whole mountain or hill range to be pretty light as it gets down to the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with all four colors on my brush at the same time. Not a lot of black, just a little bit of black, and not a lot of any really. A little bit of purple, a little bit of blue, and a tiny bit of white. So not a lot of any of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of draw in the the outline of the top of the hills. So I'm going to have over on the right hand side, this is going to be kind of where my hills are going to be the tallest, and I'm just kind of doing these roly-poly kind of hills. I want them all to be within my sky, so you have to have them at least as high as wherever your vacant canvas is, and you can really have them in whatever formation that you would like. I'm going to have a couple maybe coming up in through here, and then maybe I've got another one down in through here. And then once you've got that on there, really what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be dotting in the rest of the way. So I want them to be a little bit lighter as they come down towards where they're going to meet that water, but there is going to be a the front trees are going to be in front of this, so you don't have to worry about what happens in a clean fashion as it's meeting the land below. So if it looks messy at the where it's meeting the water area, don't worry about it. What I'm trying to do right now is really just give myself some faint, out of focus hills in the distance. I'm adding a little bit more lightness or white to my brush as I get down towards the bottom of the hills. So that's going to give them kind of like a hazy type of glow at the bottom of them as you're seeing them through the trees that are going to be in front of them. And of course, you can make yours as light or as dark as you want. But once I've got them nice and formed, like I've got in through here, then I start playing with the tippy tops of them. So if my moon, I'm going to have my moon somewhere over here, I can add these little bits of highlights on some of the edges of the mountains that are facing what's going to be my moon. So if I want this area to face my moon, I can take a little bit of white paint and just kind of illuminate the top of that little mountain or hill. If I want this one to look like it's being hit by the moon's glow, I can certainly add a bit there. Maybe this one's doing it on the top. So you can really have some fun with how the moon kind of casts its light onto these back hills. Maybe this one is being shadowed by a cloud or something. So maybe just this one has a little bit of light to it. And I can bring this in front of this one. You can really have some, make this an enjoyable experience and have some moonlit mountains off in the distance. And then we are going to be using this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your back mountains all nice and done, and again, you can tweak them to be as blue or as purple or as gray as you want them to be, we're going to use this same brush for the next step. So you can just wash it and dry it and get ready. All right, so I know that I said that I wanted to use my large brush for the next step, but I have changed my mind. I would like to use my medium brush. So I want to do the moon next, and for some reason I had the large brush in my head, but the medium brush is going to be much easier to do the moon with. So I'm using the medium brush. I'm using just white paint. I will use a little bit of water too after I get my shape on there. But how I'm going to do this, I'm going to have my moon, I would say about a third of the way over from the left-hand side. So if this is your center and this is your quarter way, it's almost halfway between that and the quarter way. So I'm going right about here. I'm maybe about 2 or 3 inches away from the top of my canvas. That's where I'm placing mine. If your land ended up a little bit different than mine and you want to place it somewhere else, feel free to do so. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a very little bit of white paint on my brush, so not much at all. I'm not painting a very large area. I don't need a lot of paint. And I'm going to have my moon about 1.5 inches wide by 1.5 inches tall. And then I'm going to put it in place, and then I'm going to, once it's in place, I'll pick up a tiny bit of water on my brush to get a glow around it. So I'll show you how I'm going to do it. I'm going to start in the center here, and sometimes my hand gets in the way when I'm doing a circle because I want to do a circle and my hand gets in the way. So I'm right here, and then what I do is I just kind of twist my brush around and around and around, and that gives me the most natural kind of circle type of shape if I just kind of let my brush kind of go around. Now what I'm going to do is I just dipped my brush in a little bit of water, and I can take it and I'm going to soften the edges of the moon and let my brush kind of create this glow around it. The glow is going to look whiter when the paint is wet, but when it dries, it will be more, because it's translucent when it's got that water in it, or it will become more translucent as it dries. So if it's a little bit bright for you, the glow, when you're putting it on here, don't worry, it will get a little bit duller as it dries. And then once you've got that, then I just kind of go back to that center and just kind of keep tweaking the center until I feel that it is bright enough and that it is of a good enough circle shape. And you can continue, once you've got it all in the shape that you want and the glow is around it, you can wipe that water off of your brush. And if you wanted to put a little bit more white in the center, if you want that center to be a little bit brighter, you can certainly add a thicker layer of paint in that center. That'll help to kind of intensify the brightness in the center. You might need to wait for it to dry a bit to put that second coat on, but I knew that my first coat was nice and thin, so it dried almost on the fly for me, so I was able to just kind of go right in and add that second coat. But you might have to wait for yours to dry a minute, and then we are going to definitely use our large brush for the next step. So once you've got your moon on here, you can put your medium brush away, take out your large brush, as I'm going to just keep tweaking my moon here, and let me just get this nice circle around the edge. There we go. And get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're putting our pine trees in. So I'm going to be using my large brush. I'm going to be using black and green paint. They are going to be going in front of my hills, but I don't want to cover up all of my hills. So I'm going to be kind of strategic where I'm placing them. I'm using black and green so they look like they're more in focus and also kind of in the silhouette, or being silhouetted by the moon. So what I'm going to do is I've got my large brush. I'm going to put both green and black on my brush, about equal parts of both. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a horizontal line that's going to be the bottom edge where it meets the water. It does not have to be perfectly straight because this is we're representing a lake of sorts, so it doesn't need to be a perfectly straight horizon line. So when you see me do mine and mine is not straight, just know that's all right. I'm not intending for it to be going straight. So I need all of these trees to be within my water. So if you've got some rough little bumps and stuff like that, you're going to paint right over them. So I'm going to go a little bit below where these two meet, something like this, and I'm just kind of skirting my brush back and forth, left to right, to get all the way over to the other side. And then once I've got all the way over to the other side, and you can see mine is not perfect, this is just giving me a nice place to start for the trees. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up again both black and green, and I'm going to get my my silhouette of sorts in place. So how I'm going to do this is an inherently flat brush, so it's narrow on one side and wide on another. So as I'm doing this, I'm going to be using the narrow side to make a whole bunch of different height points within my trees to give it the appearance of pine trees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of dot my brush up in varying heights, and then as it meets this bottom, I kind of get it a little bit wider. So you can really have fun with the different heights of these trees. And I'm going to kind of go quickly to get them all on here. And then once I've got them on here, I'll show you how to give them a little bit of dimension with utilizing the green and the black. But right now I'm just kind of using both the colors at the same time. You can see I'm giving some different heights within my trees. Pine trees are really intended to just look like tall kind of triangles in its simplest form. So all I'm really looking to do is represent some really pointy tops and at different heights. So that way it gives it a pretty good representation that this is maybe just a nice pine forest that's sitting at the far side of our lake. And every time I go to reload my brush, I'm picking up the same. I'm picking up both the green and the black. I think I want a couple of tall ones over here, which is why I just kind of skipped around a bit. You could certainly go systematically from one side to the other, but I just wanted to give myself a couple of little markers to make sure that I put in the higher trees that I wanted to. And then as I come over to this left-hand side, maybe I'll have this one pretty wide in through here, and you can see I'm just having fun with this, giving a whole bunch of different heights to them, giving little clusters of some tall ones and some short ones, and you know, just varying heights throughout it. I've got a couple that are going higher than my hill profile, so you can certainly do that as well, but I definitely want to keep a lot of them low so you can see that light area that we put in. So now that they're there, I'm going to just pick up green, and what's going to happen is I'm going to add the illusion of highlights to these trees, and maybe some trees that look like they're sitting in front. So I didn't wash my brush. I'm just picking up green paint at this point. I know that my moon is here, so theoretically all the trees on the right hand side would have a highlight on the left hand side. So if you think that, you can easily kind of give yourself these beautiful just hints of highlights on the left hand side of some of those trees, and that's going to allow it to still remain kind of in the shadows, because it's, or in the silhouetted kind of way of the moon, but it also allows it to have that highlight on it. If you wanted there to look like there was one in front of the ones that you already put there, you can just do kind of a short point of sorts, and that will give you the illusion that there's one sitting in front. So you can really play with this green. It will get darker as it dries because it's sitting on top of the black paint. So know that if you go ahead and do it and you're like, oh well, it just, you know, as it dried I lost a whole bunch of the detail, that's because you have black underneath. So you can certainly go and add some more on top of it. The more the thicker the green paint is, the more it will be visible. And then as I'm transitioning to these trees that are right below the moon, I can certainly have highlights wherever I want. I'm just kind of having fun with this green on my brush right now, giving myself some beautiful, ooh, that tree's gonna grow. Look at that one. Sometimes they get a little bit bigger than you thought that they were going to, but that's the beauty of it. Maybe I've got some coming on in through here, maybe, and then as I go to this left-hand side, my highlight will be on the right. So I'm just kind of adding a little bit of the illusion of the moonlit glow on my pine trees. And if you went too much with the green, you can always bring back some black, make sure that where it's meeting the water has enough paint on it. And then we are going to be using our large and our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got your pine trees all nice and laid out, you can wash and dry your large and your medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm going to be doing for the next step is I am painting the reflection of my moon. So I'm going to be using my large and my medium brush, and I'm going to be using primarily white paint. But if you go through this process and you're like, I just put way too much white paint on there, you can certainly bring back some of your colors from your water. So I'm going to start with my large brush. I'm loading my brush with white, but I'm not loading it with a ton of white. So I'm just kind of putting it in the side of my palette and have a little bit on my brush in through there. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to have my reflection from my moon coming a little bit to the right and coming at a diagonal. So it's going to be kind of all in a diagonal type of way from my moon. I'm always going to be using a left to right brush stroke throughout this. It's going to be pretty wide right at the top of my lake, and then it's going to get a little bit more narrow, and then it'll kind of splay back out as it gets towards the bottom of the area. I'm probably not going to reload my brush throughout this. So I'm going to start in through here. I'm just going to kind of pull this to the left and to the right, just making sure that top area of the water is nice and bright. And then I'm just going left to right, kind of getting it a little bit more narrow in through here. And then I'm going to continue to get it wider and wider as it comes down towards this bottom right hand corner. And I'm blending it in pretty well. I don't have a lot of paint on my brush, and I am getting it pretty smooth looking as it's kind of transitioning into the water next to it. You can certainly pull it out in certain areas if you want to. And then once you've got that on there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my medium brush and white paint, and I'm putting some sparkles down the middle of my reflection. So just white paint, and I'm putting really bright, really thick paint kind of down that center. I went into my land a little bit. That's all right. Like this. I don't want to cover up the entire area that I did with that first layer. And then you can just you can put little polka dots. You can even bring some little sparkles coming out of that center area. I'm really just adding some super brightness to that center area just to add that extra bit of sparkle from the moon. And then once you're all done with this step, we are going to be using our medium and our small brush for the next step. So add as many sparkles that you want into that reflection, and then you can wash and dry this medium brush and get your small brush ready as well. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting our lily pads. So I'm going to be using my medium and my small brush. The colors that I'm using are green, yellow, white, and black. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with my medium brush. I'm going to start with just green paint to get all of my shapes in place. So I'm going to have them really large down at the bottom of my canvas and then really small up in the distance. They're traditionally going to be kind of like an oval shape, and we're seeing them from the side. So we're really just going to be making a narrow kind of oval for the shape of them. So I'm going to have a really big one down at the bottom because I'm going to have a really big flower in through here. And if you paint over some of your, sparkly reflection, that's okay. So I'm doing my first one is like that, and I'm going to have some of them kind of overlapping one another. I'm going to have a big one over in through here. So these right now, again, are just kind of we're giving ourselves a roadmap of sorts of where we're going to have our flowers in a little bit. I am going to be doing some wild grass that's going to be coming up behind these and stuff, but I'm going to be making them a bit smaller as they go farther away, a lot smaller as they go farther away. So I am going to be overlapping some there, that you can see that they're bumping into each other, and maybe I'll have a little bit of a cluster back over here. So right now, as I'm getting into the smaller ones, I'm going to just kind of wiggle my brush a little bit. To the left and right, just to give it just that little tiny bit of the essence of the little pad, or lotus pad of sorts that they're going to be sitting on. And then I'm having them kind of all around my sparkly area, and of course they're getting smaller and smaller as they go farther and farther away. I think I'm going to have a couple little ones up in through this direction. So again, I'm just doing these little tiny dots of sorts for these smaller ones. I'm going to have a whole bunch of them up in through this area at the top of my water, and then I think I'm going to have a whole bunch up in the top left-hand area of my water as well. So really just these little kind of dots to get them on in these little kind of clusters. Maybe I want this one out a little bit farther. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up, without washing my brush, I'm picking up yellow and white on the same time. So this is going to just add a little bit of a highlight on the side that that moon is on. Even if they overlap a little bit, you can see how I'm getting this one to overlap. We've got this, and I'm really just kind of doing the essence and these streaks of sorts, so that way we're not going to be seeing a whole heck of a lot of these pads anyways once we get the flower on, but this at least will translate as this side is being illuminated by the moon for any little pieces that pop out or that are showing along the edges of that of the flower that we put on. And if you need to, when you're getting to these smaller ones, you can certainly use your small brush, but I'm going to kind of muscle through with the bigger brush as much as I can, something like this, and just making sure that I've got a good amount of lightness at the edge, so you can just kind of see that it's being illuminated by the sun or by the moon. And then I'm just picking up a little bit more of the yellow, green, and white to get these little bits of highlights on these other ones that are super far away. Again, it's just kind of adding that little bit of shine onto the pad itself, and again, just little dots and dashes on the ones that are in the far distance, because you're not going to be able to see the detail on those. You're just giving it the illusion of being illuminated by that moon. And then I'm going to do the same thing with a shadow. So I'm going to use my small brush to do the shadow right behind the lily pads. I'm just going to wash and dry my small brush, and I'm going to pick up some black and green paint. So you're not going to see the back of all of them, but you might see the back of this one. So I'm just going to put a little bit of black and green along the back side of it. If it sits, maybe this one, I make this one sit on top of that one. I didn't like that. Maybe I'll put that one back on top. So you can certainly tweak them to see whichever ones you want in front of the other one, but just adding this bit of a shadow behind some of them is going to give it that extra bit of dimension as we start to build the flowers on top of them. If you have areas where you can't see it, that's fine. Just kind of put it at the bottom of the ones that you can see, something like this. And of course, it doesn't have to be exactly the same as the lily pad. Maybe there's a little bit of water that is, rippling out of sorts, so don't feel like it has to be a perfectly executed shadow along the bottom part of the lily pad. It can certainly just be in a more impressionistic kind of way. And then we are going to be utilizing, let's see, what are we going to utilize for our next step? We're going to utilize both the small and the medium brush again. Let me just get a couple of little shadows in through these ones. And again, these are the back side from the moon being over there, just giving a little bit of shadow on the back side of some of these lily pads. And then we're going to, again, utilize both brushes, just kind of doing little dots and dashes to give the essence of these little shadows over here. And then I'm going to wash and dry both my medium and my small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're doing the first layer of our lotus flowers. So I'm going to be using my medium brush. I might go into my small brush as well, so I'm having it ready just in case, but definitely the medium brush and possibly the small brush. The colors that I'm going to be using are red and black, and how I'm going to do this is I'm going to do them all red first, and then I'll put a little bit of a shadowy part underneath them. So I'm going to be using my medium brush first. I'm going to have these really big ones down at the bottom, so they really are part of the focal point, and then they're going to get smaller and smaller as they go farther away. So these flowers can come in different colors. They can come in red, white, pink, any variety. They're between, I think they can even come in purple and like peachy colors. So you could really tweak your color to however you want. They're going to sit. Some lotuses have a stem to them that you can visibly see, and then some sit right on that pad. So again, you can make your own variation. I'm going to have mine sitting right on the pad, and they're like a cup of sorts with the petals kind of coming up and out. So this is going to be my biggest one, so I'm going to kind of hit here first. But I do want to suggest or recommend or, inform you that it'll be easier if your lily pads are dry at this point. So just make sure they're dry. I just hit them with a blow dryer. And here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and start this first one. And it's got to sit on the pad a bit. So I'm going to make sure that I've got this nice and wide at the bottom. And then I'm going to go ahead and make it about as tall as I want to with my first leaf or petal or two. And then I'm just going to kind of give myself this exterior type of shape where I've got my petals just kind of all coming out in this direction. And they don't all have to be the same length. You can have some longer or shorter. And if you painted over some of your beautiful twinkle in your water, you can put more next to it in a minute. And then so that's gonna be my biggest one. And then I'm gonna go ahead and make some others in through here. I think this one I'm gonna have sitting on this pad here. And just paint over the area of the pad in front of it, because that's what it would naturally do in nature. So don't feel that you have to work around all of the lily pads that you had made, and you don't have to put a flower on every single lily pad. So I'm going to go ahead and put one over in through here. And of course, I'm going to progressively get mine smaller and smaller, as this will be my biggest one. And then everything else is going to get a little bit smaller and smaller after that. I think I want another pretty good size one on here. And again, they don't have to be exactly the same as the one before. Just give it your own special variety. And then I'm tackling, as you can see, my biggest ones first, and then I'll go ahead and make my smaller ones, because the smaller ones obviously are going to be a little bit easier and they're going to have less detail. Maybe I've got a little tiny one over in through here that's just kind of adorning this little part of this lily pad. And then maybe I've got one, I don't know, on this one in through here, where you can just see a bit of the one in front of it. And of course you can, like I said, make as many as you want, but you don't have to cover every single lily pad. Maybe in these little clusters, you just kind of do a few in through there, maybe just a hint there. And then as you're going towards these smaller ones, I think I want one here too. Little one in through here. I'm going to have a lot of lotuses in mine. I was like, you don't have to do every lily pad, but I'm finding that I want to. And then I'm going to go ahead and make my smaller one. So as I get farther and farther away, you might find that you want to utilize your smaller brush. I'm going to switch to my smaller brush just so I don't make these too big and clunky. And all I'm really doing is these little tiny red polka dots. And again, I'm trying not to hit every single lily pad, but if you do, that's all right. Yours is just filled with lovely growth, so you can have yours as fertile and as many as you want. And then I'm just going to do some little polka dots over in this tiny portion over in through here. And then I'm going to utilize my both brushes again with red and a touch of black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this little shadowy area down at the back bottom of my flower, something like this. And again, I don't need to blend it in perfectly, but this is going to give me the dimension on the back side of that flower. So just a little bit at the bottom. It doesn't need to be a lot. I have both the red and the black on my brush right now. I'm not going all the way up that flower. I'm just kind of pulling it so it almost blends a little bit with the top petals. And I feel like I'm going to want to switch to my small brush right about now, because I feel like my big brush is just too big and I don't want to paint all the entire flower. So I just switched to my smaller brush, something like this. And you can also, if you want to, especially on the bigger ones, if you felt that you wanted to put a shadow of the flower on the lily pad, like right behind it, you could totally do that. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. Let me just kind of get these other shadows. And of course the tiny ones don't really matter because you're not going to see all of that little detail. But if you wanted, say, a shadow be on the lily pad, just wash and dry your brush. And then I would pick up a tiny bit of black and green paint. And you could put, let me just move my canvas just a little bit so you can see it. you could put a little bit underneath that flower and then just pull it out onto the lily pad. So that would be depending on how big or small your lily pads were or how much detail you really wanted to put into it. But if you wanted it to look like there's a shadow behind the flower onto the lily pad, you can certainly use a touch of black and then just bring that little bit of a shadow, and it can be a long shadow because that moon is really low in the sky. So it's kind of low, but you could bring that shadow behind the flower if you wanted to. And then we're going to use both of these brushes for the next step as well. So once you've got your base coat for your flowers and that little shadow underneath, you can wash and dry both your medium and your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm going to do for the next step is I'm putting the glow in the middle of my lotus. I know that's not really what it's called. It actually has like the little pollen things on the inside of the flower. I'm going to make mine yellow and white. I really just this is not intended to look like a photograph, so I'm really just going for the dreamy-esque twinkly glow that is in my head that I see in the middle of lotuses. So I'm going to use my medium brush for most of it, and I'll probably switch to my small brush for those teeny tiny ones. I'm going to be utilizing yellow and white on my brush at the same time, so the white is going to highlight the yellow kind of on the fly for us, and the yellow is going to make it look like the inside. So I did, again, recommend that your red is dry on your flowers. It's going to be in the center of the flower. You can go on top of some of these tips if you want, or you can have it up above. I'm going to overlap it, and I'm going to be doing just a little polka dotty kind of brush stroke. If you can still see little tips behind it of the other petals, that works, because that's going to indicate that we're seeing a little bit of that other side. So I'm just using a little bit of yellow and white and just kind of polka dotting a little area at the top center of the flowers. And if it's not yellow enough, just pick up a little bit more yellow and add that in there. If it's not popping enough and not bright enough, you can add more white to it. So you can just kind of adjust it as you see fit, but having both colors on your brush is going to allow you to get some great diversity in these little polka dots. So you're going to have some that are really yellow, some that are really white, and that's going to add to that illusion of this being almost glowing from within that flower. And I'm going to go ahead and do it to obviously a lot of the ones that I see the higher detail in, and making sure that I've got some good polka dots and that you can really kind of see that brightness to it. So I need my paint to be a little bit thicker. I'm making sure that I don't blend it. I'm just really kind of putting these polka dots in place. And again, I'm not caring if I paint over the stuff that's behind it, because that's what's going to happen naturally in nature anyways. So I'm just making sure that I've got it in the intensity and in the spot that I want. And then I think I am going to switch to my small brush for the little one. So again, just reloaded my brush with yellow and white. And I'm really just going to put the hint of a couple of these little dots up at the top of these flowers, again, just to give you the illusion that these ones have it as well, off in the distance. These little tiny ones, you've got to pay as much attention to those as you do the bigger ones, or give them the same due process, even if it's just little tiny speckles. That still adds to the illusion of the entire painting. And then we're going to be using both of these brushes for the next step, so you can just wash them and dry them and get ready. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're finishing our flowers. I'm going to be using my medium and my small brush again, and what we're really doing is finishing the petals on the flowers. So we want to make sure that they're not see-through, because when we use just red paint, the red paint is translucent, so that was just the base coat. We're going to add the dimension onto those petals, and we're going to give them some highlight from the moon's bright glow. So I'm going to be using red and white are going to be my colors. And I'm going to pre-mix myself a pink as well with my red and white. So I'm going to take a little bit of my red and add just a touch of white into it. I don't need much. I just want it to be a little bit on the pink side, so that way I have diversity in my petals. So I don't just have red and white petals, although when I mix, if I was to use red and white on my brush at the same time, they would naturally mix into some kind of pink on my canvas. But this way, now I've in essence got 3 tones of the petals, and that's going to make it look a lot more natural. So I've got my pink on my brush right now, and I'm going to kind of lay in place where I want my petals to be. So I've already got them started. And as I do this, I don't need it to take up the entire red area. So I just kind of added in this wispy kind of fashion some of the light tips to it. Now, without washing my brush, I'm just picking up some more red, and this is gonna kind of overlap into the dark area, and I'm just giving these petals over here just another kind of layer to them. And these are shorter paint strokes than I used on the first go around, and then I can go ahead and do that with the majority of them, just adding that pink and the red back into it. Yeah, right now I've got the pink and the red on my brush at the same time, and I'm just kind of alternating, picking up those 2 colors from my palette, so that way I've got a diversity in what I'm adding to the flower itself. And you can bring these little edges right up in front of your glow area if you wanted to. I haven't added the straight white to my brush yet because I'm kind of reserving that for after I get all of my back petals nice and established, because if I was to put the white on my brush right now too soon, what'll happen is I might run the risk of blending everything in together too much. So this kind of just builds my petals in a easier way without running the risk of overdoing that where the red paint is, or where the dark side of the lotus is. And then when I'm ready, I will add just a little bit of, like a little white twinkle of a highlight to the tips of the petals. I'm gonna switch to my small brush now because I feel like my brush is too big to get these littler ones. And again, I'm just using the pink and the red right now to add these bits of little highlights, or just finishing the petals so they have good dimension to them. And again, these ones back here don't really need to do much, just kind of add in a couple of little polka dots with those colors just to make sure that the colors are represented all around and everywhere has its own bit of dimension to it. And then once I've got all of these, I'm gonna just add a little bit more over into these ones over here. Once I've got the back petals established and they have enough thickness to them, that's when I'm going to start adding those bits of highlights with the white on my brush. So once I've got this done, I feel like that's pretty good. So I'm not gonna wash my brush. I switched back to my medium brush. I'm just picking up a bit of white, and I'm gonna pick up my paper towel that I just dropped too. So I picked up a bit of white, and then what I'm gonna do, I know my highlight or my light is over there, so I'm gonna start to add the brightest parts along the edge because that's where the moon would catch it the most. And then I'll just bring it in a gentle fashion, a couple of these back here, maybe some of these tips have it a little bit, but I'm not going to go overboard with that highlight on the back side. I really just want the tips to look like they're being illuminated by the moon's light, and maybe some at the, the little top side of the back, but I'm not going to go full on all the way into the back because I don't think it would happen that way. Not with my sparkly moon anyways. And then I'm going to go ahead and do as much as I want on these little highlights, and again bring it back a little bit if I want to. and adding, you can see just adding these bits of sparkles on the edge really brings these flowers to life. It just tells you the story of where that moon is and how it's casting its beautiful glow on them. And as I'm working towards these smaller flowers, I'm gonna switch to my small brush, and again, just giving them a bit of white on, in essence, kind of, the farther away they get, it's going more towards just the left side of that particular flower. But again, when you get to these little tiny ones, it's really just a bunch of little tiny polka dots with the same colors, just to make sure that we've represented what we needed it to. And then I've got these little tiny ones up here, just adding some little white sparkles to the tops of them. And again, just little tiny polka dots. Over here, these are a little bit bigger, so I'll add a little bit of the pink as well if I need to. But again, just kind of these polka dots at the top of the flower. I think that needed a little bit more elevation, so we add a little bit more there. And then I've got these tiny little guys over here. And then of course, once you've got them on here, step away, look at it from a distance. You might find that you want yours to be lighter. Maybe you want yours to be of a pink version instead of a red version. And you can certainly go about just tweaking and doing as many little modifications as you want. You can even bring some of these petals up in front of the edge of your glow area. That will make it look nice and natural. So you can certainly just kind of keep tweaking this until you feel that you've got it into the vicinity that you want, making sure that you've still got some nice little corners that are poking out and that you've got enough paint on it so it is all fully developed and you can't see through it. And if you want to keep tweaking it, feel free to do so. We're going to use our medium brush for the next step. So I'm just kind of making sure that I've got all the back sides fully rendered, and then I will wash and dry my medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm going to be doing for the next step is I'm painting some wild grass. I'm going to use my medium brush. The colors that I'm using are black, green, yellow, and white. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with just black and do like the silhouette of the pieces of grass, and then I'll come back and put a little moon glow on the tips of them. So I'm using my medium brush. I'm just using black paint, and this is just wild grass that is untamed on the side of a lake somewhere. Mother Nature has taken over and made it very tall and fertile. I do want to recommend, if you do have any wet flowers, that you might want to make sure that they're dry. I'm going to be overlapping mine a little bit, but if you don't plan on overlapping yours, you don't have to worry about it. So here we go. I'm going to start over on the left hand side. I'm going to have some coming at the bottom. I'm going to put some at the bottom and then I'll make it grow upward. So I am just doing some loose pieces of grass that have some wiggle and wave to them. I'm putting a couple behind some of my pieces of lotus, or behind my flowers, so that way it will again give us dimension to the painting and make us feel like the lotuses are just on the other side of this beautiful wild grass. So I'm not holding my brush very tight, so this way it gives it some good kind of natural bend to it. And you can picture this grass to be whatever style of wild lake grass that you would like yours to be. I just like to kind of let my hand tell me what type of grass I'm going to be making today. But I know that this is just going to have some really long pieces coming out up above my my mountains and kind of flanking the side of my canvas. You can utilize this type of grass as good space fillers. If you have an area of your painting that just looks like it needs a little bit more something, you can certainly utilize this type of beautiful wild grass to do that. I'm not going to take away from all of my other focal points, so I'm just kind of cautiously going around them, but I don't want it to look like, I want it to look natural. So you can have a piece going in front, but just don't cover it up too much. And then on my tips, I'm going to just kind of do these almost like wheat type feathery type ends to some of my pieces of grass, so you could certainly do whatever you'd like to on the ends. If you wanted them to just be single pieces of grass, you can certainly do that. I'm just getting mine to look wild and carefree, I guess. And then I'm going to go ahead and go over onto the right hand side. So again, same thing. I'm going to do a couple little pieces down at the bottom, maybe behind this big flower down in through here. You could even, you know, put some in front of that lily pad in through there. And then as I come over towards this right hand side, I'm going to really fill in this bottom corner because I feel like this definitely needs a little bit of volume in through here. So just kind of fill that in with a good amount, and then I'm going to bring some in through here just to make sure that I've got, again, a nice space filler, I guess, is good for me over in this direction, just making sure that I've got it how, you know, filled in as much as I want to. And then I'll have maybe a little piece coming up in through here. And I want it to look natural, so my brush stroke, definitely my pieces of grass cross over each other. They're going to cross over some of my flowers, which again makes it look really natural, because that's what's going to happen out in nature. They're all just going to grow in front of one another. And then I'm going to bring a really big one up in through here. And then I think I'm going to have one kind of coming from over here somewhere, and it's going to just kind of make its way onto my canvas somewhere in through here, making some bigger ones coming up in through here. Maybe I have a big one coming in this direction, and then maybe I've got some of those little pieces of wheat just kind of being silhouetted by the moon, giving them their shape. We can really see that shape now. If you want thinner pieces, I suppose you could certainly utilize that, your smaller brush, but you can see I'm definitely getting some to cross over one another, giving myself some really good movement in here, and just trying not to make each one look exactly the same as the other one. So I'm really just kind of having fun here and making sure that I kind of wisp out my brush. I think I might want this to be carried over just a little bit further, so I'm just going to bring that out just a little bit further. And then what I'm going to do to put their moon glow highlight on here is I am going to just quickly wash and dry my brush, and I'm creating a light green of sorts. So I'm going to take a little bit of my yellow, a little bit of green, and a touch of white. I want this green that I'm making just to be a little bit lighter than my green oxide, and I think I just want it to be that way so it adds that extra bit of glow from the moon, and it doesn't compete with the other green that I have elsewhere in the painting. So it actually is kind of just its own color of sorts. And then as I'm doing these little highlights, I don't need to do every single piece of grass. I'm really just kind of concentrating on the areas that are closest to the moon. I'm just really kind of flicking it on here. Even if I run into some wet black, I'll just paint that in. If I want a piece in front of here, I haven't reloaded my brush. I'm gonna now that I said it though. I'm gonna just kind of get a few pieces back in through here just to, again, give me a bit of alternative look to the grass, so it's not just black, but it does have its own kind of identity for that green. And then I'm going to go ahead and do some pieces over here nice and close to the moon, and I'm going to add a couple of pops of white in a second, but I'm just kind of getting this bit of a high, and you can see this green is just illuminating the tips of these pieces of grass. You know, maybe these almost look like palm fronds, so maybe this is a lake down in a tropical area somewhere, so you can really, again, have fun with it. Just a little tiny bit on these pieces over here. Again, I don't want to take away from the dark silhouette of it. Now I'm going to pick up that green plus a tiny bit of white and just do just a few pieces with the white in it. again, really closer to the moon, just to give a few pieces that have really caught that bright, bright light from the moon. And of course, you can make yours as bright as you want, or, you know, keep it as dark as you want. Couple of pieces in through here just to let you know that maybe these pieces caught a little bit too. Definitely some bright, bright ones on the tips of some of these pieces. And then we have one tiny little step left to go. So once you've got these, I'm really digging the highlights. You know, every time I am doing a painting, there's usually always one piece of that painting that's like, yeah, this is it. And the highlights are doing it for me today. So I'm just kind of getting these on here, which I don't know if I'm going to be able to stop or not, but I will definitely attempt to stop in a second here. They're almost looking like little feathers too. I'm digging them. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more on these tips over here. And then I am going to be utilizing my tiny brush for the next step. So once you've got all of your wild grass on here and you've made your painterly eye happy, as I have, you can put this medium brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I'm going to be using my small brush. I'm using black paint. I usually sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right corner. I think I'm going to sign this one in the bottom left. I'm just going to hide it in this little piece of grass right in through here. You could certainly sign yours wherever you want to. You could sign yours with your first name or the date or a symbol, whatever works for you. It's your painting. You sign it however you'd like to. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you painted yourself a really beautiful lotus lake, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.